Okay, let's go. Hello, welcome to Frivolous Gravitas. Today, we've got a bit of an ad hoc episode for you, but that's okay because we know what we're doing.
We're professionals.
We're professionals. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Frivolous Gravitas with me, Jordan, I guess, and our... I guess I'm Pinky, and we have the brain over here, which in the form of Kris. So
I'm not sure if that's endearing or not.
I don't know, maybe. But today we're going to be putting our brains together and talking about video games. Why we play them? Are they a waste of time? Do they cause violence? Yes. No.
And a bit on the side, we'll be putting our pinkies together too.
Yeah. We promise that will tell you the truth or something. So, oh man, I'm just full of bad jokes. So, I don't know. Where do you want to start, Kris?
I was thinking about starting at the easy parts, the good parts, the reason why people start playing games and why they're so popular and how they got so popular. I don't know if we'd necessarily want to get into Atari and all that, but we're both kids of the 80s, so we grew up with games in some form or another, but primarily on 8-bit and moving upwards from there. So
yeah, I remember those days, and I was really, really bad at video games back then. I could never get into them. Like the side scrollers, the Mario jumps, and then I just was always so bad at them, and I always found that they were made for some people with capabilities that I didn't have. So people that could a mental perspective that I just couldn't get a hold of, and I was terrible. But it really kicked off for me when 3D video games started, because that I inherently understood. I could understand a three-dimensional environment. It just clicked with me, and that's kind of when it started for me. I wasn't into video games at all before that, really. It was kind of a neat thing that you could do.
For me, it was all the moving parts. I loved how even with pixels, not pixel, what do they call it? Sprites. Even when they had sprites moving around, they would use 6 or 7 different sprites to show the character turning. So it wasn't a full 3D animation per se.
Yeah.
They were just swapping pictures in to make the character look like they were moving on a plane. To me, that was just fascinating. Especially on Game Boy, something so small and portable that just ran on batteries. You could do 3-dimensional illusions, basically.
Well, or anything in the build engine, you have Doom or Duke Nukem or something like that, where it's not actually 3D. It's actually a 2D textures put together in a way to give the illusion of 3D and height and depth, and they have weird teleporting mechanics in the code that make it all seem like you're in 3D. And they did some interesting stuff, non-Euclidean geometry. You're walking around in a circle of 700 degrees in a 3D environment, and it doesn't make any sense. But because it doesn't obey the laws of physics, they can jank out some weird physics, and that was really interesting. But I was still really bad at those.
But I think for me, the biggest impact it was it opened my mind up so much to see these types of different worlds and be able to move through them, even if it looked really crummy. It's so much different experience than reading a book or being lectured to. Do you know what I mean? The instant feedback and response you get from games is almost like a stimulation that you'd get from an active engagement in work or something. It's different from a passive receiving information from TV, where a show or a movie is just telling you what's going on and what's happening next. That instant feedback to me was just revolutionary.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the first couple games weren't exactly Duke Nukem didn't really have much of a message. Here to kick ass and chew bubble gum. It's okay, they got that from a movie, but
but the fact that you could move through a different map or a world, before that, all you could do is watch a cartoon of somebody else doing it. You couldn't actually engage in your media
or hallucinate, but that was more like a dream than a reality. You weren't there. You weren't. Oh, well, the thing that's happening there is the key point is agency. In a hallucination, you have too much agency. The world is completely flowing with what your, like, there's no inputs that aren't you. And so it's only kind of neat as a movie. Or if you're reading a book, you're hallucinating. I don't know, prove me wrong. And the hallucination that you're getting from the book is completely controlled by the author. And you're kind of there as, you know, an observer. Some books have tried to do this with second person narratives, but they don't really work. The guy who wrote Holden Caulfield book, Jesus, can't remember the name right now. The kid who talks about phonies. Yeah, no.
J.D. Salinger?
Yes, Salinger, you're right. Sorry. Yeah. I had to go check this is why I have these here. Not just to be like, oh, Jordan reads so many books, because I forget the authors. Reference wall. So, and he tried to write a second person book, and it was okay. But it's, with a video game, it really does something different. It allows you to not only create a narrative, but engage in a narrative as if you're the one engaging with it. And that's, like, I know it sounds small. It's like, oh, but you're still, you know, this or that. But it is revolutionary. Like, you get a different medium. And because you have a different medium, you have a new message. And the message is much more nuanced if you can do it. But the problem is that it takes a lot more expertise to make it. And
I think those types of games, like, inspired creativity, though, in that agency, as you put it. I like the way you put that, because you're basically putting yourself into that 8-bit world or the 16-bit world. But what I think is really important, though, is the difference in your brain function when you're doing it. So I think as kids growing up with video games, their neural pathways are, like, you know, as you grow, your neural pathways sort of connect to your experiences, and that's how you gain wisdom and knowledge and whatever. Yeah. But I think through games and doing that for kids, like, spatial awareness is different because they realize from a young age that it can be artificially distorted. Like, concepts like that, you don't even fathom until you're an adult and you start abstracting away life and the meaning of, you know, purpose and virtue and honor and all this type of thing. But, like, the kids learning through a video game are actively engaged in it rather than being preached to. So it's almost like they can... it's like when you're teaching, you want to engage your classroom because then they'll retain and learn, get a deeper understanding of the material you're teaching. I think games do that in a passive way, which is really unique because you can stimulate your brain without exhausting yourself. And I think that's crucial to video games as opposed to other media. Right. Reading exhausts me, like, just the focus and effort.
Because if you want to actually, like, dive into something, you have to put effort into you have to, like, pay attention to it. So, like, anyone watching this and actually, like, paying attention and not passively listening, like, you know, it's not bad if you're passively listening to us guys, but if you are trying to form a criticism of one of our episodes, you have to actually sit down and listen to us, take notes, and that's gonna take extra energy. And it's the same with a movie. You have to sit there and pay attention. You know, you have to, like, you can't just let the movie happen to you, which is what most movies are made for.
Except the great ones. The great ones really pull your heartstrings or whatever and get you involved.
Well, the great ones, and I brought up Barry Lyndon to you off screen thing, but that one pulls you in without letting you know that it's pulling you in. You get invested as a matter of course, and you end up at the end, you just kind of, like, you were immersed in it. And that's it. I think one thing that allows games to do that is that because you're exerting your agency on the game, you are able to immerse yourself in it to some extent. And I think that allows the content of the content, so the content of the game, to, you know, get into your brain a little more. It hooks you in a different way. Where a movie, it can hook you in, but there's still that separation between reality and the movie, for the most part. And once the movie ends, you have this encapsulated thing, or maybe it's like it gets you craving a sequel like a junkie. But you have that separation. With something like a video game, you get, and I don't really, the ages of video games don't really, they're all trying to do the same thing every generation. Some generations do it better. And And there's different types of games too that do this. So like a puzzle solving game is going to be different than a game with a big narrative, or an adventure game, or a fighting game, or a strategic resource management game, or something like that. But they all kind of want to draw you in so that you get immersed in the action of what you're doing. Now, disclaimer, I guess, this only goes for good games. A bad game won't be able to do this. And so probably when we say video games, we're probably going to be talking about good games mostly, because bad games are what we would call a waste of time.
But think about it this way, though. With the bad games, those are the ones that help you pinpoint what's good in the other games. Because it's really hard to say what's so fun about Spider-Man swinging around, or Horizon Zero Dawn climbing giant mechanized dinosaurs, like robot dinosaurs or something like that. But there is some kind of like catharsis or satisfaction you get from like climbing a huge mountain in a game that looks like a huge mountain. Or when you're trolling around the screens in Zelda 1 with like the top-down view and you're exploring new areas, you get the same types of feelings, even though the graphics of the game might be buggy or weird or janky or, you know, video quality or whatever. Usually, as long as the motif is consistent, we seem to have no problem becoming immersed in anything, no matter how ugly or rancid it is, as long as there's like some kind of compelling drive to move forward. So as long as there's a clear and precise goal and the controls are known, easy to learn but hard to master, those types of things, right? But I think it's the bad games that show us how those types of things are important. Because in a bad game, when it's too difficult and people just give up and throw it away, or they get so angry, it's like, this isn't fun, I'm angry.
Yeah.
That type of realization sort of helps us guide our other leisure projects. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, well, for something to be bad, I always thought it would have to be, I do want to pick up the thread that you just put down there, but for something to be bad, I always thought like there's a couple ways it's bad. One of them is just, there's things in the way of your immersion that, you know, the things that connect you. So, you know, something like Call of Duty does a good job because the distance between the controller and the game isn't very much, because they've fine-tuned it to be as smooth as possible for the player. And, you know, you have stupid mechanics like, you know, menu mechanics that just make it a lot easier for the player to interact with things and not take them out of it. And like a lot of little stupid details like that go into connecting the player to the narrative or the task in the game. But there's another part where, and this happens in movies too, where the people making the game think they know what actually works, or they have, well, as long as we have a few of these immersion things, then we can stick in some loot boxes and that won't take away from anything. It's like, okay, so this is what, there's that creativity without any creativity that we find so much in amateur professionalism. So examples of this, I guess, would be the new Star Wars movies, where they think they know what makes a good movie, but then when they put all their textbook things down on the paper, it's just
feels
some
manufactured kind of, like they're just putting pieces together.
Frankenstein monster. And we get this a lot. And it happens in games too, which is why people gravitate to the good games. And so, but there's a lot of different types of games, and there's a lot of different types of experience. And the one thing that's great about games, and even more so than movies, is that you can tailor, you can just play the games that work for you. But not only that, but you can play the same game in a different way, and get the different experience in the same game with the same narrative for a completely different person. Example of this would be like, one that I like a lot is something like Europa Universalis4. Yes, I'm that big of a nerd. Where you're playing as, you know, the head of a country, and depending on how you play, the game completely changes. You're bringing your nation through the early modern period, through the Reformation, the Renaissance, the all the holy wars, and industrialization, colonization, and all that stuff. So you can be a colonizer, or you can, start as a Native American country and fight colonization, and you can do whatever you want. The game changes depending on it. And a lot of games are like this. You get something like Grand Theft Auto, or which is going to be different based on your approach to the game, definitely. But I think what Kris was saying, was this the thread that you laid down that allows you to I guess food for your creativity? It allows you to practice creativity to a certain extent. I think that's what you were trying to get at. And so,
and not just practice, but like it helps grow it. Like where
yes,
you otherwise not have thought of something. Like one of the neatest games that I played on PlayStation 3 years ago was Just Cause 2.
Oh,
The neat thing about the game was just how big the world was. Like we'd never seen a world that big, and you could fly up like 2 kilometers into the air in a plane and jump out with a parachute, or dive straight into the water, or whatever. But like skydiving is one of those things that everybody kind of that we dream about, and we what do you call that? Like not
it's on people's bucket lists.
Yeah, but it's like a fascination of everybody falling, that free falling.
Oh,
you know what I mean? That liberty of being just in the open air with nothing around you, nothing below you, but it's obviously
a
too dangerous to do in reality. But like Assassin's Creed did it too with climbing. Everybody looks at a giant cathedral and just be like, that would be so awesome to just hang from the ceiling.
Well,
every kid has that impulse. We're all monkeys down at
me more so than others. Be like, there's a tree, I'm gonna climb it. And Kris would probably be like, no, Jordan.
I'd get up like 2 steps.
Yeah. Or you'd be like, Jordan, we need to go eat. But Just Cause 3 was even better. Best of the series. But it allowed you to have so much freedom and creativity in how to maintain your objectives in a world which was frankly made to be humorous.
Yeah, like, just over the top and absurd.
There's a war, and you like, I think in the first like big mission of Just Cause 3, you have to take out this missile that's being launched. And so what do? Well, you take your grappling hook and you hook yourself onto the missile, and then you ride the missile while the bad guy's yelling at you in the radio, and you boop boop boop, this little screen comes up in the missile, and then you punch the screen and jump off the missile.
Yeah, it's like playing a Fast and Furious movie or something like that.
Yeah.
But like I can't stand those movies because they're just like gratuitous.
Right.
Some of them are great, like we talked about Shoot 'em Up and Bond and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like to play it, to be able to like change the way you look around the scenery and the way you approach the villain and how long it takes and the countdown timer.
Well, there's something
all that kind of stuff really gets into your blood.
Like, it's childish, but there's something inherently creative of, okay, so I'm going to take a jet and I'm going to aim it at the base that I have to take over, and then I'm going to jump out and parachute down, shooting rockets at the base. And then when I get to the ground, I'm going to take over a tank and then run around in circles until that catches fire. And then it's just like, so it sounds like you're just being a child in a sandbox. But if you're not deliberate enough about it, your character will, die, and then you'll game over and you have to approach it. So you can't just be like ADD about it, although sometimes you can. But
that's a great game for it, because once you practice, you can kind of just do anything just reflexively, and then you're basically watching a movie that you want to watch, not just something that somebody else wants you to watch.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about it is, now I think the underlying thing behind this is, well, I don't want my children playing that. That's a waste of their time. They could be learning chemistry while they're doing this. And yes, that's true, 100%. But
you could also learn chemistry in a game. Like there are games like No Man's Sky, where your crafting is all based on real elements. I mean, the elements don't do what they do in real life, but if you had to sit there and memorize the periodic table, It's a lot harder than playing a game where you collect elements and craft stuff with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm really skeptical about now I remember in being a fly on the wall in some faculty meetings, and one of the teachers had just played like Assassin's Creed and was like, we can use this to teach history. And I'm just like, having played Assassin's Creed, I'm like, no, it has no bearing on history. I had to like go in and find the real stories of all these guys who have, are nothing like they were in it's going to give them a bad expectation of history. It shows them the basic content of history, the names and the dates, but the alien sub-story or framing device actually does more to hurt the...
Yeah, but the plot says right from the beginning, these are based on historical characters, but the stories are completely made up or whatever.
Also, why
the value part, though, is walking through a town in the 1400s.
Right, that I loved.
Or the 900s.
I hated
can't
the narrative.
Do that in any other way.
No, and there's a couple
documentaries have CG and stuff where you fly through, but it's not the same as seeing people just like walking around.
Yeah, there's a couple games that do this. Brothers in Arms was good because they recreated the actual battlefields of World War II. Like they went there, took pictures, and said, okay, this is where this battle was fought, and this is where the player is going to fight that battle. And it's not like Call of Duty where you just go in and just you have to like, tell your fire teams where to go and what to do, and you have to keep in mind suppressing blah blah blah. So they actually wanted you to fight it like they had fought it in World War II. It was a bit janky, but it was a good effort, and it really puts you in saying, oh man, this sucks.
This is terrifying.
This is terrifying, but at the same time it's exhilarating. One of the things that I play a lot of Paradox games like Hearts of Iron or Europa Universalis or Crusader Kings, which puts you again in the head of state of a country or something. But you actually do learn what it is to be, what kind of influences are on a leader during these times. And it's weird because you're being like, at school, I'll be like, there's this guy was a tyrant, blah, blah, blah. How could he do this? What a horrible person. You boot up Europa Universalis, you get Louis the Fourth up there or something, or you put up your favorite, early modern leader, and you're just like, let's attack, let's go, I need more land, I want it, let's convert all the peasants, change their culture.
Yeah, and you feel that temptation right from the beginning where you're like, oh, I could be nice and I could try and be like the good leader, but it's just so tempting to take that power and just go wild with it, you know what I mean?
Or and I feel like a lot of these, they don't teach hard skills, and that's it would be very hard to teach certain things. You have to learn the hard way, and memorization is that. And I think it would maybe in the future we'll gaming technology will come to such a place where we can understand human interaction enough. But right now what we can learn are, creativity, but these soft things, the context of things, and like trivial data, like I don't know, the munitions of 1943 Europe. Why do I know so much about that? Because I played a ton of video games, and then I've updated that information with real world real world data that doesn't, because the thing is that you are filtering this information with through the guise of a narrative. So postmodernists, this is your day. I'm going to actually argue in favor of you. But the narrative does place a bias over any information that you're going to be getting, and you have to filter that through the bias of reality. And so maybe Hitler didn't have a mech suit, but Hitler was an actual guy, so go read up on him.
And I think that's a big thing too, because whether we like it or not, kids aren't reading as much anymore. And whether we like it or not, people do forget the past when you don't remember it. So having games that are historically derived, even if they're completely made up in false situations, harkening back to our Remembrance Day episode, at least the mention, the mere, even if it's not like an immersive, perfectly historically accurate situation, the mention of the names will reflect in your brain when you go and read it down the road at university or something. When you hear the name Medici, you're like, that's a prominent figure, that's an important character, that's somebody I should pay attention to.
That's that guy I crushed in 1463. Now, the interesting thing about this that you bring up is that, and I'm going to get into, I mean, this is definitely opening up a deep pit of stuff, is that
I think it's great for a memory trigger. That's sort of what I was getting at.
Oh, well, you unlocked a trigger in my mind. And I think it's fruitful, because one thing that I find people do when I talk to them about games, and I notice this in myself, is that when you're in a game, say something like Elder Scrolls, just works. But you get into the game world and you don't give a hoot about the game lore. You couldn't care less. You just, what's the game? But then all of a sudden the dragon flies over and there's this thing between the Stormcloaks and the Imperials, and it's just like the Gauls and the Romans, but with magic. And all of a sudden you care about the game world. There's a lot of games that do this. Metal Gear Solid's probably famous for this because its lore is... I'm not even going to get started.
Convoluted doesn't even begin to describe it.
Intentionally convoluted.
Yeah.
And then he got creative. We tend to, as people, and I kind of been wanting to do an entire episode on this, is that the lore ends up hooking you, and it hooks that religious part of your brain, the part of your brain that gets, and I think it's the religious part, which gets you, I must know more. I must dive into the lore. I need to know everything I can about this. And all of a sudden you are reading audio logs, you're reading the books in the game, you're reading all the menus. Mass Effect had you reading the codex. What is this alien race? What is this alien race? What does this gun do? What happened, 40 years ago? It's like, it's a self-contained, thing. And all of a sudden you find yourself accidentally studying, even if you've got ADD, you're accidentally studying this like 500-page thing in the game, because all of a sudden you're in the world and you don't know anything about it. What do? Well, you learn.
And they give it to you in bits and pieces at a time. It's not like sit here, read 20 pages and memorize as much as possible, right? It's like one codex, one scroll. Here's the story about the big clock in the middle of Italy, and then you move on. Here's the story of the Sistine Chapel, and then you move on. And it's just kind of like tidbits. Yeah. But through repetition, especially if you play the game more than once, or any of these games, if you play them more than once, it really sinks in by the second or third time you see it. You can recognize things that you've never seen or places you've never been to. That to me is just phenomenal. Yeah. And I mean, anybody can see this stuff just looking it up on the internet, but nobody's voluntarily trying to figure out, hey, I wonder what New York looks like from the street's eye view on 3rd Ave and 6th Street. But to have the experience through a game of walking through it, even if the buildings and stuff are different, right? Understanding the geography of the area, even. Well, and it works because if you try and like that, you raise a great point there. Like, if I don't really care what, I don't really care what one of the streets looks like in Austin, Texas. I couldn't care less, because it's not contextually linked to me. There's no reason for me to know that. It doesn't enhance my life in any way. But if I'm playing a game where, I remember playing a good example here, and this is why we actually use examples. I was playing, I'm actually literally looking at my Steam game list right now. It shows. Yeah, thank you. Metro 2033. Which was a great game. Holy nuts, was the atmosphere good. It's definitely got that Russia jank, but whatever. And the game is set in a post-apocalyptic Moscow where everyone lives in the metro tunnels. And so what you end up doing is, because you're interested in how to do the game, your brain starts going, I need more contextual information. And so you start, Wikipedia, you start going on Wikipedia, looking up the metro tunnels and looking up what they look like when they're not post-apocalyptic, which is hard because it's Russia. And then you start learning about, the history of the metro tunnels. Then you start looking at pictures and geography of Moscow, and you're like, why am I reading this? Yeah. And you're interested in the lore. They accidentally got you going. Haha, you got me studying there. But
what happens is because of these two things, is that information is, we care about contextualized information. Uncontextualized information, even if it has like some kind of value, it's trivia at that. Like, uncontextualized information is just trivia.
And that type of trivia is really like mentally heavy to try and memorize stuff that has no link or relationship to other ideas or thoughts in your head, right? But when you have like a plot line or a character, or you have memories of walking through the same pathway or the same metro tunnel or something, and you see the brick patterns, you'll recognize brick patterns in Europe that you'd never seen.
Yeah. Or like trees, well, or environments from our plane. But what it's leveraging is our mythology engine, I would think. And this is kind of my big, thesis on this that I kind of want to do another podcast on, is that we are mythologizing. Yeah, that word.
I had to practice it while you stumbled.
Thank you. We're creatures that do that inherently. There's that one Sapolsky lecture which you have to dig up, that one student did on the evolutionary biology of religion. And I'm sorry, religious people, but religion is part of our biological makeup. That doesn't make it any less meaningful, though, because we don't know why it's there. Just because we can't see God doesn't mean it could be another one of those things that's like, oh, what's God up to? There you go. I've solved it.
But, well, just to counter that, rocks don't have beliefs, so it's still meaningful. Just the fact that we can do it, that makes it meaningful to some people.
Yeah. Oh, geez. I'm sorry. I'm on gallery view. Okay.
It doesn't matter. I'm recording.
Okay. So so we have this mythology engine in us that drives us, and it's this neat little evolutionary adaptation that forces us to try to understand what's going on around us. And it's this wonderful survival mechanism, because if you don't understand, or you don't actively use the tools we have, it forces us to kind of put stuff into context, into perspective. And if that means calling something Zeus, or giving the sea agency, then that's what you're going to do. And then all of a sudden you build, but you can't just have the sea have agency, because that's dumb in itself. But if the forces of nature all have agency, and you're part of that nature, and everything has thing, well, that actually makes sense in some stupid way. And so you have this necessity to create worlds in our head for reason or another, and games leverage this amazingly. Even if it's something like you got Red Dead Redemption or something where it's a cowboy game, you have this mythology of the Wild West. It's like, well, it's not historically accurate. It's like, it'd be stupid if it was.
And boring and dirty.
Yeah, and now I do like me a game that's, historically accurate. Kingdom Come Deliverance was pretty historically accurate, and down to the way people lived in I think it was Bohemia, but ancient Central Europe in the Middle Ages. And all the dress was as accurate as possible. The town was, they did tried to make the area look as good as possible. All the weapons were historically accurate. The way people interacted with each other was historically accurate. And there's tons of lore in the game. The thing is that the lore is based on reality, but that doesn't mean it is reality. You are interacting it as if it's mythology, even though it exists, even though all the mythology existed in the real world. All the people you're interacting with, all the forces acting upon you were real forces that would have acted on someone in that same area of Bohemia in the 13th century. But your brain is still acting as if it's a mythology. And so it's going to connect to that as if it's, something that you need to know to move forward with your life. And it's neat because you are actually learning about Middle Ages Bohemia, which is not historically been one of those hot topics, the Crusades or something like that, or 1066. It's what's happening with King Wenceslas the fourth or something, and you get hooked in because your mythology engine makes you pay attention for your survival, even though you're not actually the one swinging the sword. And so you're actually learning something. But I guess the same thing happens when you're playing Skyrim, and then all of a sudden you're learning about the history of the dragon gods.
I think that looks at it a bit too specifically, though, because to me, the exposure to novel ideas and imagery, that's the learning process. It's not about seeing something that physically actually represents something else that's real. It's about seeing something that you've never seen before, just period, and then relating that to something that sort of was similar in reality in another time. So, like, first things first in my mind is getting the image of the surroundings and the environment and the peoples and the customs and the culture and the lore and all that, and then relating little bits of that to reality. It's not to say, like, this is reality and you should memorize everything around you, because to me that's not the point. That's not really...
What I'm trying to say is that the reality in the game, your brain needs to learn the tenets of the reality of that context. So your brain, watching Star Wars for the first time, you'll be like, your brain doesn't go, well, lasers aren't real. It tries to go, okay, how are lasers real? And
we suspend disbelief for the sake of entertainment, right? But the mythology part of it is, I think it's a really important component to it.
Oh yeah, this is only one component.
Yeah, but that's our engagement part, right? I think the important part to it, though, is that it's part of our biology to mythologize things, like you said. But to belittle it because it's inaccurate or not true, I think is irresponsible. Oh, no. I would suggest that because of our biology gives us a penchant for creativity, and because we're social creatures, we're story-driven just by nature in our biology, I think mythology is the natural side effect of that. It has to occur in anybody who has compassion and love or experienced interpersonal relationships. Stories are necessary parts of that, because if there's no continuum between characters, there's no plot development, and if there's no character development, you can't really engage with the story at all from start to finish. And then the environment is bland because you don't care about the characters and yada yada yada. It sort of cascades away from you. But the mythology part brings it close to home. And then just not taking it literally, I think, is the most important part, because as soon as if you suspend disbelief and then take it literally, like, you're learning bad things that aren't true.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And like, we do meet people who are like, who take lessons from, well, actually it works like this. It's like, no, actually that's a game and you're not. Or the kids who take Star Trek literally. It's like, the point wasn't that technology exists. The point was that we should all get together and not care that someone's an alien.
Yeah. Like, and by alien, we just mean people of other races, but we're not going to say it.
Yeah. Spock was a stand-in for whatever other that you haven't met yet. Be open-minded, you bad person. So, like, they were worried that Spock was going to cause more of a fervor than Uhura because there's an alien on the bridge. It's like, okay, but no one cared, because they were more like, what is he? What does he do? What's his history? What's his backstory? Why does he have human? And that's that storytelling. But sometimes you do it bad, and then like you end up like, there was a war, and you're like, cool, and it was bad, neat, and now you're fighting, okay, and go fight. Why? And then you're just sitting there with your sword being like, nah.
Yeah, I don't really like any of those games. I'm more of a strategy type. Like, I'll like games that are kind of like active board games. My favorite are tactical RPGs where you're managing stats and modifiers and you're bumping stats, and then you sort of want to you can cater your team to however style of play you want, but then if you don't use that style in practice, then you're going to be too weak to overcome the enemies or whatever. So you really have to, not that you sit there and study to plan ahead, but you think about it. You go through the menus and you're switching contexts, and based on the challenge ahead of you, you sort of set up and prepare in advance. And that type of thought process, again, is very similar if you're going to go like on a vacation or something. To be able to think of things that you didn't think of because you didn't sit there and take the time to plan ahead, it's really hard to do that without practice. But when you practice every level of a game or a dungeon crawler or something, you know, putting the right shield on, the right boots on, the right gloves on, all for the environment that you're going into to give yourself the advantage that you need, because that's part of the game, right?
Yeah.
You need to gain the advantage, otherwise you just get stomped.
Yeah,
I think that's really good for brain development, though. Like thought.
Oh
process.
no, like that type of thought process. Because a lot of times, whatever. Okay, let's not talk about schools and education for another episode. But a lot of what schools are doing is like memorize this, learn this way, and a lot of my students are like, well, what thing do I need to know to learn this? It's like you need to learn how to think. And like part of the thing how to learn how to think is, well, with the things I like that one's good. Like I'm going into a situation like this. What kind of things do I need? And you have to, the problem's in front of you and you're solving it. And this is you're essentially practicing problem solving, and with a lot of variables all at once. And so when you break it down, it's just all of a sudden somebody at work comes to you. It's like, yo, the stuff didn't show up at the thing. Okay, so the variables are the stuff, the place, and the contractor. That's 3 variables, but in a video game, you could be faced with like 30 all at once, and you're just like, all right, let's do this. And so when you come back and it's just like, just tell him, like, send Jim to bring the stuff there, and give him a smack and tell him to get to work. Like it becomes almost a boring thing because you want
and you don't
better.
get overwhelmed by like sudden changes, because games are constantly throwing things at you from like the wall. You walk down a hallway and something jumps out at you from the side, and then every hallway you're looking to the side to see if something's going to jump out at you again. And then you get that little endorphin shot when you like looked ahead and saw them there and picked them off, and you're like, haha.
Well, this brings us to a good point, is that it gets you used to certain failure. It gets you used to trying again, getting up and trying again. It gets you used to doing hard things because, well, one of the things I noticed about myself was when I was playing Europa Universalis4, which I'm going to call EU4 from now on, is that I wanted my nation to have the best. I didn't want it to lose any one province. I didn't want it to lose one war. I wanted it to have, this steady growth thing. And I learned that that's actually not a fun way to play the game. It's better if the game's a little frustrating, because it's more fun if you lose a war and then get a bunch of countries forming a coalition against you, and then all of a sudden there's a reformation in your province, and then you start your low incline, and then by 1750 you're a powerhouse, and you've fixed all these problems, and you've maintained stability in your region and your realm, and all of a sudden you're just like, yeah, I fixed problems. But then one of the things that this game does is that every once in a while, randomly, it'll throw like random things at you. One of the stupidest ones being, there's a comet sighted in the sky, and your stability drops, which means that everyone doesn't work as hard in your realm, and your money goes down, and your diplomacy doesn't work as well, and your trade is not as efficient, and you're just like, ugh. So you have to reorganize your entire country a bit, and it just throws stuff at you, and then you get used to having stuff thrown at you. Now, doesn't have the gravity of, say, something like, all of a sudden someone knocks on your door and says, oh, hey, there was a woman died recently, and this is your baby, so now you have to take care of it. And all of a sudden you're just like, no, pause, reset, load, save. No, you can't do that in life. So there's a little more gravity with like stuff that happens in life. That would be being an extreme example. Especially
I think it's a good one, though, because that's, I think, one of the risks, and maybe we'll get into the risks of video games at the end after we glamorize them a bit more, because there's a few other like side effects of the of video games that I wanted to get into too, about the types of games. But specifically, I wanted to point out the word I was looking for before was fantasy.
Fantasy, yes.
And even indulging in fantasies is also important, because it lets your mind wander, it lets you expand. It's like a feeding ground for creativity. If you're doing other work and you're just trying to get your mind off of it, the best way to fix a problem, if you've been focused on it and drilling it and trying to fix it over and you just get stumped, is to walk away from it for a bit. Like that whole term sleep on it. That's like a thing. Like your brain does work in the background, the subconscious. And fantasizing in games is a great way to get your brain to fix problems for you without thinking.
Yeah, and I've gotten really good at it, but like I put a lot of work into being creative. That sounds so lame, but I it's part of what I had to do. And like I do remember doing that. I can't figure out an essay or how to write a paragraph, and I'll literally just be like, okay, I'm gonna ignore it. Like, and that's what I would do for all my conclusions of all my essays, every single one of them. I would finish the entire essay, and then I would leave it for like at least a day, maybe 2 days. And I'd come back on the third and I would just sit there and be like, and I would just knock it out, and it'd be good. I'd edit it, add a few more things, maybe a quote, and then it'd be good to go. And it's because I hadn't gotten all that minutia. I had let all that minutia go. And when I'm having trouble relating this back to video games, but I'm pretty much propping your example up.
Well, think about it like collecting. Like everybody by nature, we have like this biological, again, proclivity towards collecting things. We're hunter-gatherers after all. So as much as we love to shoot things, we like to collect things too. And that's why every game almost has, every game I've ever played anyway, has some kind of collection element to it. Some kind of currency system built in where you have to save up credit by doing work so that you can afford to buy gear or progress through the storyline or keep playing the game, in other words. Right. So it's a reminder too of the reward that comes from hard work. So even though you're sitting there doing nothing and wasting time and having leisure or whatever, it's reinforcing strong values like the usefulness of being productive while you're not being productive. I mean, it's kind of ironic the way it works, but I think the relatability towards the approach that people take to the games that they play is really important, so long as it doesn't get out of hand, as long as it doesn't start becoming more important than the real life, because that's obviously a problem.
Yeah, and because you've got this world all of a sudden that, you know, you work at I don't know, Starbucks and it's not glamorous. You hate your job. You're not getting much pay. And then you go home and you are the god of battle or something. You know, like the armies of the enemies crumble before, you know, your might, blah, 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 blah. And then you leave out of that. It can kind of become a bit of a power fantasy, a bit of a
escapism kind of thing.
Yeah. And that is definitely the problem. Now, with anything, it's you do want to look for quality in any media. Like, you can read bad books. I do read like I read a lot of very thick literature, a lot. But when I'm trying to get to bed, I'm not going to put in some philosophical treatise. I'll put in something a little lighter in order to get my brain, you know, thinking on randomly. I'm not going to press my brain too hard. Although some days I don't do this, and I don't know.
Speaking as somebody who has difficulty reading, like I myself would not have gotten through hardly any literature in the entire world, because just in my lifetime there wouldn't be enough time to sit and read that much. But with a really mundane game, even a bad one, as long as it's something that's really easy for me, that I don't have to pay attention to, that I can just drift away, I can listen to a book and pay more attention to the book than my game, but I can't do it individually. So in that respect, I'd almost consider it like a therapeutic device to have these mundane games, even if they're bad or poorly put together. Or I think all games are useful to different people in different ways, though.
Yeah,
like, I can't sit there and play a shooter because I just don't care enough about pointing and shooting. I just really don't care. But I will collect things just because it satisfies my little OCD tendency.
I think that some games, though, like anything, there's some, like every game tries to do something. It's just some do them really well. And you really want to gravitate towards the ones that do them well. And because you're going to get more of a thing from it. Now, I guess let's get onto this conversation, is the economic distinction, which I think carries on from what you were just saying, because one of the things I used to do was I would study all day. Just I'd get up, make breakfast, prep the stuff I would need for myself while I was study for 12 hours, and then I would get 1 hour between that and bed to do whatever I wanted. And I would sit down and I'd play, a lot of times I'd play like Mountain Blade, which is kind of a open, it's like a sandbox hack and slash with really good controls, medieval knights and whatnot. And it would wind me down. It would get my brain off of my studies. It would put me somewhere else. It would let me have this thing, and it was acting as a reward. Honestly, it was this thing that you did work today. Here's some reward for you. So now you can, it was something I earned essentially.
And something to look forward to too. Like while you're grinding it out at Starbucks or whatever the job is, and it's just like a means to an end, you're just waiting for school to get done. Mm-hmm. It's like it's not just a relief, it's a stress relief. And stress really affects our body physically, like very much so. Mm-hmm. So to have some type of tool or implement that you can turn on with the push of a button, unlike people where you need to like coordinate your lives together, if like having a conversation with people might be just as stress relieving, but it'll be harder to coordinate because you can't just push a button and force somebody to be there and entertain you, right?
Yeah, just sit down at a restaurant with somebody who's sitting alone, just be like, we're talking now.
So I think part of the benefit to it is it's so instant that it's efficient. So instead of needing to put 3 hours of your day aside to have coffee with a friend once a week, you could still have coffee with that friend. But when you need it during the week and don't have 3 hours to go meet somebody, you could just do it for an hour and satisfy that same type of stress relief, that need for leisure.
And this is kind of why I bring up economics, is because you are making an economic decision there, what to do with your time. And if you're playing video games 12 hours a day, that better be your job. But you're wasting your time. Well, no, you're wasting your money, because you could be making money, you could be going to get a job, blah, blah, blah. Video game is a reward. It should be a reward in your life, or something you do to wind down. Video games aren't bad. I don't think anybody shouldn't be playing them, blah, 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 whatever. I don't think they should be banned. I don't think the violence in them should be banned, blah, 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 whatever. That's censorship. We'll get to that in another episode. What is important here is that leisure is an investment in your life, and you need to treat it as an investment. Oh man, I need to take a day off. Why? So that next week when I have that big project coming, I can go hard on that project. So I'm going to take a day off this week, not get as much done. But next week I will be rested. And we all do this. We all make these decisions. And video games, like you said, are efficient. I can boot up some of my games in under a minute and be in the play world within seconds, thanks to my SSD drive, and click my brain off of that. Or one thing that's been really good lately is with my the heart condition from my adverse vaccine reaction, is I needed to rest. I suck at resting. I was gardening. I wanted to go for walks. I wanted to go for runs and bike rides and this. No. I needed investment in sitting my butt down in the chair. And video games were one thing that let me do that. But my brain still wants to go. So like Chris was saying, you read an audiobook while you're doing it. You watch a podcast or something. If you're listening to us right now and you're playing a video game, put what you're playing in the comments. I want to know. To you. Yeah. Tell us about it. I really
for making these videos, like I got to edit sometimes, and to find out where the timestamps are to edit, I have to watch the videos or listen to them or whatever. I do that while I play a game. And it's not that I couldn't just play the game on its own. I have this thing where I need to be like constantly be productive, right? So I feel guilty or dirty if I play video games all day. But I'll force myself a couple times a year, like once in the winter and Christmas, usually around New Year or Christmas, and then again in the summer at some point, and put a day aside where I let myself play as much as I want kind of guilt free. And I never usually spend all day doing it because I'll get bored or fatigued or, whatever. But
Yeah.
I think the risk is some people get so attached to it because the worlds are so much better than their perceived reality. It's usually a function, or it's usually a sign of a dysfunction in the way they're perceiving reality. So it's not the game that's drawing them in that they're getting addicted to. It's the lack or the absence of appreciation for the world around them. And those values, like you were saying, of like the reward where you do it after or sometimes before, you'll play now and then commit to doing some hard work later. I think that needs to be more reinforced in just general culture, because I don't think that's obvious to kids. I think that might be an adult perspective that we have just because we grew up with crappy games that you couldn't really play for 20 hours straight. I mean, we tried to play
Final
NHL
Fantasy
95 and Sega
bad
and
for
stuff.
that. It's like, this game is 80 hours of content. You're just like, nowadays I'm just like, that's like half a week. And I think that's one of the ways I learned it, was playing Final Fantasy. And I got the save game, it tells you your playtime, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
Whoops. And but
recognizing that you can plan for yourself and give yourself challenges to overcome in order to get that reward when you come home, I think that's really, really important, and it's often understated. Like, most people are going overboard talking about how bad or good games are, or whether or not they should be banned or censored or whatever. And I don't think that's even as much of the argument as telling people how to play responsibly. It's like gambling. We constantly tell people don't just go crazy gambling. Gamble what you can afford to lose, have some fun with it and whatever. But with games, we don't do that. We just, it's there, your TV's there and you're sleeping next to it. And we just expect people to be responsible somehow without ever telling them what responsible gaming looks like.
Well, we just let, like, white parents will be like, okay, this is racist, but whatever. White parents will be like, well, we'll just let Timmy figure out his responsibilities on his own. So Timmy's not going to figure them out. And then you have, other parents being like, no video games ever. Video games are bad. You're not going to learn anything. And that's also wrong. Like, as a teacher, sometimes I want to assign video games. I wanted to assign Stanley's Parable once, just to explain just certain narrative structures and something. And it's this weird game where you are literally at the whims of the narrator of the game, and it changes based on what you do. And then the game pays attention to your narrative decisions and like mocks you for them. And it's a really weird game. It's like a hour or two, and it's a really neat experience. Definitely try it out. But it's a piece of art, and you have to interact as a piece of art, not as a waste of time. What is this doing? Why is it doing this to me? Why is it making me do this? And it's playing with what it can with the medium. And a lot of games do this really well. You see, and when you look at them, one of the latest ones, I think Doom Eternal, geez, that had an effect on me. It's like, oh, it's such a beautiful piece of art. No, that. What it was good at was manipulating the player's actions. So it got you to, interact with the world in a certain way by not letting you do something. And the art of it is that it got you to get hype in a situation that, while you were still able to, somebody's messaging me over Steam right now. It's so meta. It got you to, it changed your behavior within the game by showing you what was the right way and the wrong way to act in the game. And this isn't like, well, this is the right way and this is the wrong way. No, that's stupid. If you act this way, you're going to die. If you act this way, you will be the supreme badass. And it seems like that's just like, oh, well, they just did it because the guns are like this, or did this. It's like, no, there's a lot of little subtle decisions that when you look at them are absolutely brilliant. And if you play the game in the right way, it becomes this really interesting experience that makes you feel like a badass, but you actually have to put effort into getting the hang of the game. You actually have to get good. This is why people like Dark Souls too, which is like, I won't, but my brother-in-law, if you're watching, hi, he's loving it. I've seen him play it and he's good at it, but he's probably enjoys it because of the stupid difficulty. And then you've accomplished something. Like, if you're good at Dark Souls, you've definitely done something. And I forget my meta point. But
I think you were
the
getting
artistry and
mastery.
Right. The mastery, I guess we can, but the artistry itself is the thing that you can find in these games, and it's not the same as the mastery of a piece of art. It's not the mastery of, you know, a really good movie. It's not the mastery of a book. It's a completely different thing, and we're not paying attention to it because we, unfortunately, see video games as things for children because, honestly, in all fairness, they used to be things just for children. It's a game. Are you going to, it was this new thing that kids played, or, you know, computer hackers, in the old term, the people that used to just go to Radio Shack all day and buy resistors and transistors and stuff and put together their computers, and they would load up, they'd build their own computer, put some games on it, and then they'd play the computer, but the game itself would be like the thing that they were trying to make it do. But the whole part of it was, you know, you're building a game from scratch, essentially.
Yeah, with the mastery, I was sort of more thinking about the skill curve. Like,
yes.
You developing confidence and self-esteem type of things, you know what I mean? And again, for most people, it's probably not useful to have a self-esteem over your mastery of a video game. But for some people who have self-esteem issues, it's probably a huge benefit, which gets back to my idea about it being therapeutic. So for me, it would help me concentrate on something that's really hard to focus on, like lectures or studying or old literature or things like that, that I basically can't do with physical medium without a distraction. But then the distraction means I can't consume the media, so it's difficult, right? But when it's sort of wrapped together in something that's engaging, or something that's active, or something that's visual where you can look around the object, it's so much different looking at a rasterized two-dimensional image of a painting, or being in Assassin's Creed and having a gallery in your home that you could walk through of all the paintings that you collected or purchased from doing side quests or something like that. You know what I mean? It gives you some type of like a sense of earned ownership of these digital assets that are in, and then when you look at them, you see them differently because you worked to get it. You remember the time you went to the little shop in the corner, or found some rare thing down, you know, a back alley somewhere, and that's the one item in the game that you can get it in that one place in the game. But then it stands out because there's a memory of the process of finding it. You know what I mean? Like, getting there is part of the adventure. I think you're on mute.
I'm on mute. I'm sorry, I'm on mute. One of the things that is dangerous, that's so powerful, but it's also very dangerous because a lot of times, especially, and we can see children doing this, is that they mistake those achievements for achievements in the real world. Now, to some extent, if you're like playing esports, I guess, yeah, that might be, but it's practice at achievement. And it is achievement because, you know, you did have to do problem solving and you did have to do this, but it's not like you, man, I'm trying to be polite here, but it's, to be harsh, you weren't the one who actually climbed that mountain. It was a virtual mountain that you climbed. It was a virtual, like the stuff you do. Now, to me, well, sometimes when I'm playing a game, I remember playing like Far Cry 5 was good for this. I would just walk around and, you know, on the mountains, and like I wouldn't even try and fight anybody. And it was kind of peaceful, that game's open world. And I would almost get annoyed sometimes when like people come out of nowhere and attack me. But you know, you climb a mountain in that game, and it made me want to climb a real mountain, and that's healthy. You know, I want to go and do this, and you know, it puts me into perspective. I want to achieve this in real life as I would have achieved in thing. Now, to some extent, some things are pretty in games can be pretty impressive, like
well, think of racing games, even just to switch up the genres a little bit.
F-Zero, yeah.
But like, when could you ever drive like a motorcycle off a cliff or through a building or something like that? You know what I mean? Like,
have a race in space at, you know, 2,000 kilometers an hour.
But I think that type of thing is really good for our creativity, though. Just
Mhm.
seeing things, even if we could have imagined it, we didn't, because we're busy and we're distracted and there's real life all around us or whatever. Like you said, that mountain's always there, but you don't think to climb it until maybe you had time and you're sitting in a game and you're relaxing. You're like, I should do that this weekend. That's like achievable. It's right there. I can take a bus over
Mhm.
to the nearest mountain and go climb it. But I think that takes a lot of responsibility, like maturity. And I don't think little kids have that.
No.
I mean, some might, but I don't think that's common. Because when I played games, I was never inspired to do anything in my younger years, 10, 11, 12 kind of thing,
Yeah.
except for exploring. Because the exploration part, I think, is again part of our biology,
Well,
down with like the collecting and the fighting and
well,
the
we learn a lot of different things at
storytelling.
different levels. There's papers out that are show that, and this is much to my chagrin because this is a lot sometimes what I teach or I try to teach is that kids can't properly abstract until their late teens.
Well, especially boys, they're delayed, I think,
Yes.
3 or 4 years behind girls on abstract thought.
Girls are a little easier to abstract, but a lot of times I'll be explaining an abstract concept and then I'll get a question that comes from a misunderstanding of the literal interpretation of that abstract concept, and I'll just be like, no, this no. and like
I
I'll
think
be
feeding that
teaching critical
exploration is
thinking
really
and
good
it'll
for
be like,
people, though.
hmm?
Oh, sorry, you cut out there.
Oh, sorry. What were you saying?
Oh, I was adding to what you were saying. I think the exploration of the world around us, I think that mostly when you're older, I think it inspires exploration in the real
Yeah, I
in the
think
real world.
exploration isn't one of those things like abstraction, because exploration is inherent to, like, you're born and you're just like,
Yeah,
gotta
babies
map
crawl.
this place.
That's just what they do.
Yeah. It's just like, what's this? Now. And then I got to explore this pencil with my mouth. And
And that's where all their neurons are when they're babies, because they don't
Yeah.
have like formed brains and stuff yet, and their eyes are still developing. But
Yeah.
the thing is, if you don't get exposure to light, for instance, when you're a baby, you could be blind for the rest of your life, not because your eyes and your brain don't work, but because that's when your brain develops, is when it sees and gets responses and photons hitting it as a young baby. That's when those pathways progenerate, or whatever the word is for that.
disclaimer for our audience, this does not mean you can get your children, night vision by keeping them in the dark when they're children.
No, it means they'll get blind, like they can't
Yeah.
see anything.
All that does is make them vampires. But anyway.
But the exploration thing, I think, is also partly metaphysical, because when you're thinking about a problem and you're trying to creatively problem solve, a mental exploration of the problem in your mind, whether it's like a physical object that's broken, that's your problem, or whether it's like an interpersonal relationship, the idea and abstraction of exploration, just feeling what's around you and seeing the whole picture, the whole scope, I think is really it's hugely influenced by the way we play our games. And I think that sort of, it's telling in also the card games we play and the board games we play, and like the imagination that kids have when they play pretend, like when they're superheroes or they're characters from a movie or a cartoon. Like we used to play Power Rangers on snow hills and just jump off mountains of snow. I think that type of exploration of thought and idea and creativity, even if it's not like a productive creativity like making music or artwork, it's a thoughtful creativity. And I think that's actually more practical and useful in most people's lives, because that's how we learn to empathize with people, how to govern ourselves, how to figure out our path and direction in life, which we talk a lot about on this channel. I think that's it's really pushed and
Well, one of this kind of, to back you up, one of the things, like exploration being, aside from like Star Trek being like, we are a race of explorers, but we kind of are, because you get games like No Man's Sky or Skyrim or any open world adventure. And I remember when I had that hour of video gaming that I was, rewarding myself with, a lot of what I was doing was just walking around. Like I'd boot up Skyrim or something and I'd just lay back and I would just kind of get comfortable and I'd just walk around and let things happen. I'd be like, what's over there? And I'd just walk over there and it'd be like,
The Witcher is good for that. especially with all the lore.
Yeah, and like No Man's Sky is literally like you have all of space, go. And we have a lot of games that leverage this aspect of our psychology, and I think it's really a testament to how exploratory we are as a species. But does exploration, as you say, and I think you brought up this point really well, isn't just limited to geographical exploration, although that's really fun. Which is why I go hiking all the time too. It's like there's a path, but then there's parts of that aren't the path, and those are fun. I'm gonna go climb up there or something, and so that's inherent. But like we do need to practice, and you seem to be harping up on creativity a lot, and I think that's good, because a lot of what I can't honestly myself stress creativity as one of the most useful tools in any field ever. Mathematics, you need creativity. Chemistry, you need creativity. Chemistry,
law, accounting,
you better think you need creativity, because, well, you've got a problem. Well, how are you going to solve it? Well, what's the equation that'll solve this problem? I don't know. Maybe you have to make it yourself. Creativity. Like,
and that's what most discovery is like finding an experiment that'll pinpoint this one type of hypothesis to test it. You need to come up with the experiment and find a way that it's not going to be influenced by or biased by other factors, right?
I've seen mechanics just like go into a car and be like, this is wrong with the car. I'm just going to hook up a winch and I'll stick some ties on here. You won't see it because it'll be under this. And then I'll get rid of this part. You don't need that. And I'll hook up a tube and weld that. And then
sounds like my surgeons. You don't need your spleen. You don't need your appendix.
Well, with a car, it makes sense. But you need creativity in every field. And to think that that you can just apply, you can, if you just know, and this is a lot of what irks me about current or contemporary pedagogy, is that, well, you just have to learn all the algorithms and the heuristics and the equations, and you can, once you learn those and memorize them, you can go into nothing will be a surprise. And it's just kind of like, one of those badly written people who can in like an anime or something, where they just know how to deal with every situation as it's coming. And life's not like that. There's not someone who can just anticipate everything. There's not someone who's just thought out a contingency for everything. You have to take things as they go, and that requires a lot of creativity.
And that to me is another fantasy, but that's one that's actually harmful, because in a video game we recognize that it's not a real world, a real world violence. But in reality, when we're teaching kids, here are all the answers to life, and once you have these, you won't have to work hard anymore because you did all the hard work when you were young. Like, that's such a bad way of looking at university and scholarship, is like to get the degree, to get the good job so you don't have to work as hard. That's a really bad way of approaching an important job that you'll get from your degree.
You're getting a degree,
and you need to creatively figure out like what's wrong medically with a patient. That takes a whole bunch of problem solving and intuition, just based on past experience and everything. And there are tons of terrible doctors out there who just basically are worth no more than a Google search.
Yeah.
They just look up, it seems like they just look up.
Well, that's why,
and I get the first response and then prescribe you a pill.
That's why they keep their the screens face the other way. It's because they have two things open. One is their database where they write all their things and their notes, which they do need to take, but they also have Google on there. Now, they do have more resources than us, databases that we don't really have access to and stuff like that.
And I don't blame them. I want them
finely curated databases, because not Wikipedia, but that you have to pay to get in because those databases aren't free.
But to think that that's your career outcome, right? To think that you'll get a 6-figure salary for not having to work anymore because you got a degree, that's sort of the way we're teaching kids. Just get through this and then you'll be fine. As soon as you get your degree, then you'll be fine.
Well, we see CEOs always playing golf and stuff, and that's what we envision, fancy jobs to be. It's like, oh, you just go to the golf, you sell a few mortgages and blah,
Drive
and then
the
you
nice
do this.
car.
It's like, no, if you want to be at the golf, you have to put in 30 years of hard work first. Like,
Or play on the weekends and the evenings or whatever.
Yeah, and
But-
just because, and the thing is that you get a degree so that you can so you can have a place to work your butt off and not care about it.
Yeah, and so
Or-
relating that to like people saying that video games are fantasy or whatever, I would suggest that the way we're teaching kids what adulthood is going to be like for them, that's more of a harmful fantasy because they believe that's real. At least in a game, they always know that it's not real. It's always on a screen with a controller in their hand, right?
Yeah.
And sorry,
No, go on.
I wanted to take this because we might want to wrap up in like 45-ish or so at most. So I want to talk about the risks too, though, because we're blowing smoke up the ass of video games and stuff. And don't get me wrong, I love them. But like anything, moderation is key, and setting an example is key, and proper education and conversation is key. So what do you think of like things like the government imposing restrictions on the kids in China for like how many hours they're allowed to play? Like, shouldn't that be a parent thing? Is it a government thing? Is it like alcohol and cigarettes where we need to regulate it? Like, how far do you think this should go? Because clearly you don't believe that it's just anyone can play as much as they want and there's no harm to come from it. Obviously, you recognize that there's some kind of maturity required in approaching it.
All right, so where's my libertarian hat? No, no, but yeah,
Under your work boots.
China is always a source of just absolute tragic comedy when it comes to anything, and that whole like you're allowed to play 3 hours of video games a week, and only one of them's allowed to be during the work week, and so it's just like and you can get docked to like 30 minutes if your social credit score goes down or some. It's I guess it comes down to
regulating it though, knowing that there is a harm and a risk to the.
Okay.
Should it be just open season for anybody to just screw their own life up, or should we be parents to all of the youngsters of our nation?
I think one of the things is like I'm definitely one of those guys, because I am starting one, who thinks that the family is important, and the family does form a very important part of our society. And this is going somewhere, don't worry, I'm bringing it back to video games, I promise. Now, the family being able to make decisions in their own life takes the burden off of the state. And I think that, well, there's a lot of bad parents out there. We should no kid left behind. It's like, well, no, there's always going to be children left behind. I'm sorry. But if this comes down to, I guess, me talking about freedom again, but it from a very mechanical perspective, the state doesn't have the resources, no matter how much money you throw at it, to administer that kind of thing that China's doing. Now, China's huge, and it's not going.
Like, should we though?
Should we? I think to some extent, actually, libertarian hat off. Yes, because there are certain things that we do regulate, like gambling and like stuff like loot boxes. There are aspects to gaming which are objectively damaging, such as certain gambling mechanics, especially if your actual money is involved. Certain
What about misrepresentations of history? If you know that people playing the game are getting harmful representations of history, like denying the Holocaust, for instance, if that was in a video game, would you object to it? Or would that be a free speech, let them do what they want, even if people are going to start believing that the Holocaust was a hoax? Like, what if Trump makes a video game? All of his insane ideas and theories and made up make-believe, like, I wouldn't really want that spread, but I'm a huge free speech
No,
proponent.
here's the thing.
Suggest that it's okay to have garbage out there because that's what lets us point out that's garbage.
Now, I agree, but I think there's a silver lining to this, is that the actual Nazis don't actually have that much power in the States, or anywhere for that matter. Like, no one's really a Nazi, and the people, well, there's a couple people that are Nazis. There's a couple people that are, Tea Party people, but honestly, they're mostly harmless. And what you do get video games like this every once in a while, and they're usually indie. Oh, sorry, I didn't hear anything. They're usually indie games that don't do well, and everyone kind of looks at it as like a, hey, let's laugh at this obvious propaganda. There was a couple I can't remember. There was a video game like this, but we get games like this all the time. From the other side of the BS, we get woke video games coming out, which try and make it, they try and push agendas kind of like those new Star Wars movies. And they don't really do as well. People don't really buy them because they want an experience that, so you can say, I guess the crux of my argument is that you can say whatever you want and people can say things. That doesn't mean people are going to believe them, or like, if someone can go up to the pulpit and be like, the Holocaust or Holodomor or whatever, these things didn't happen. And then, the crowd will be like, this is good comedy. And so, yeah, they'll be like, generally the amount of people in North America that would take that guy seriously are a small fraction. They're a loud fraction because they're annoying, but people don't take these games seriously. One of the games, I loved the new Wolfenstein games. They're great, made by the same guys who made Doom. But Wolfenstein, the new Colossus, had you play the first mission in a wheelchair. So like, and then they did a whole bunch of like woke messaging and telling you like, this is what slavery was. I'm like, I'm literally fighting Nazis, and why do I need a lecture about, American politics when I'm literally fighting in the ruins of, I don't understand what this game's trying to tell me. And I didn't actually finish the game. I got frustrated with its mechanics and stuff, and I didn't finish it. And I've played the other two twice. And I think people just won't take stuff seriously if they're being preached to, or if there's a weird message. But for the most part, what you got to be worried about isn't the intentional messaging. It's, I don't want to say the accidental messaging, but the lazy messaging.
Or the subliminal messaging.
Yeah. So
where it's intended, but it's unspoken, that kind of thing.
No, not even that, but like lazy, like a lazy game will come out with a half-baked thing just to put it into their game, and then all of a sudden you get lazy ideas. But I think what it comes down to, and it always comes down to personal responsibility. It's up to the individual to say, that's dumb. But there is a line, and I think the line is where companies will try and game they'll try and cheat and try and attract customers by dishonest mechanics and stuff like that. And I think that is more harmful to people than any sort of ideological nonsense.
What about people dumping money into like DLC content or like Second Life or skins in Fortnite, where they're buying stuff constantly just for like appeal of their neighbors or friends or whatever? Like, it is a social thing to play games now, because people play games together online. Like, it's no big deal. And I remember a time when it was like, when the PS2 came with a separate, Ethernet adapter you could buy, but nothing supported it, and nobody you knew played together, and it was buggy and it didn't work. Now it's so ubiquitous, like the Wi-Fi built into these things is fast enough to run 3D games and play. Like Grand Theft Auto 5 is one of the most played games ever, and it's mostly being played online, and it's like 10 years old now. How old is that game? 8 years?
5? I think about it. I think Grand Theft Auto 5 is like 10 years old now.
Yeah, I don't know any game that's being played that long in communities and groups of people, and people just love screwing around, like blowing up cars and shooting at each other like it's paintball, you know what I mean? But without the welts and without the expense and without the, wasting gas and oil and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's why people play like Farmyard Simulator. Like there was one I sent, I showed you, and I showed Megan. It was on Steam. It was a lawnmower simulator, and I put it on Megan's wish list. So if anyone of Megan's family is watching, it's on her wish list. But
Now you've got a yard that she can mow, and she's just going to be playing games instead.
yeah, there's a real lawn to mow, but like it's well, I do the mowing, but Megan's got a real job. But
Yeah, we're just bugging.
yeah, but I think stuff like that is again, that's what I'm kind of talking about. And again, I don't think it needs to be regulated. If it's just I'm selling something and you shouldn't have bought it, because we do that in the real world. It's like we have people that buy things, you get hoarders and stuff like that. But like if you're making enough money and you just want to buy stuff, then that's up to you. But you can
I'm
buy
not thinking
stuff
about that. I mean, when it's a problem, when it becomes problematic for people just like buying trading cards of sports and esports, right? You can buy trading cards to make fantasy teams. Like that's the whole loot box thing.
Yeah, I think
in Europe and in Australia, the courts have deemed it gambling. So it's illegal for them to push it the way they've been pushing it towards kids, because kids are too young to gamble.
Yeah.
For example. So there is some degree of regulation that's necessary, but I think what you're saying is it should be incumbent upon the individual to mature enough, hopefully through proper parenting, and in worst case scenario through like addictions counseling. Maybe I think they have like video game addictions counseling now.
Well, that's probably helpful. And I'm thinking like other regulations that would be helpful are and I'm actually not against this, are age limits. Because I'm not against it, because any kid who's able to, get around age restrictions and actually play the game should be able to play the game anyways.
Yeah.
Because
if you're clever enough to steal it, then fine, just buy it.
Yeah, like whatever. But I think it helps because, one thing, it makes parents feel good, and another, it's just like maybe when you're older or play it later. But at the same time,
if you don't know anything about games, it's a good baseline, right? To just look at the cover and have a rating that says mature and be like, oh, my kid's 12. Maybe I should wait a couple years.
Yeah, I'll buy him the NHL game instead. Like, that'll be fine.
But then they whine about the fighting in the NHL game.
Yeah, it's like we watch hockey games and you whining about like but I think a lot of it should be left up to the individual, because like I did like the fact that, because when I'm thinking of restrictions on video games, I'm thinking of the state limiting the cheating in the market, kind of like getting loot boxes in there to get just a couple more cents from them, or making, and because when you regulate it, when you regulate it in a small amount, you force the industry to not just make games like Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront, which ended up just being like, it wasn't about the game, it was about the
I heard you couldn't even beat that game without paying extra money.
No, like you couldn't get the best character without like doing 1,000 hours of gameplay. And it's like, okay, at that point, the game isn't about the gameplay, it's about the gambling. Because, you get these little things, they pop out, and then it shows you as a randomized thing to show you statistically what, thing you're going to get. And you get these cards, and a lot of times it's just like opening cards of hockey cards and you don't know what you're going to get, which I guess is technically a form of gambling. But
that's an excellent point, because we used to trade baseball cards and stuff back in the day, and they would come with a little piece of gum, and that's the same thing. They're giving you sugar every time you buy a pack of cards that only have like a 1% chance of getting a rookie card of Wayne Gretzky,
Yeah, and or like the special super gold edition. But at the same time, you're also gambling when you buy insurance, so
well, that's more of an investment. It's a security.
So, well, and that's what people argue, is that like some video games are investment. And I'm sorry. Your video gaming is not a job unless you are an esports kid. You're not.
Even then, I think that's more like playing poker on the weekend. You know what I mean? You can get really good at poker and you can make a living playing poker, but it's not a job.
Well, I've actually heard people, that's a job. And this is the same thing as like kids that grow up thinking they're going to be in the NHL, and you have to make that decision. Are you good enough to actually take that path and actually have it be an investment and not be a waste of time. Because if you're not good enough, that's not an investment. And for video games, it's the same thing. But if you are good enough, invest, get in there, like push hard, get that kid into the big leagues because he's probably that good, and it is worth the investment. Because if you actually get to the NHL, it doesn't matter if you're on the fourth line, you're pretty much set. And you didn't get there, and this is one of the things that you didn't get there by accident. All the people in the NHL worked their butts off to be there. And that's something where now the esports people, I guess they do have a lot of effort that they put in. I'm still kind of on the fence. I still kind of like have trouble considering it sports in the same way I have trouble considering poker sports.
To me, a sport is an activity. And if you're sitting still, you're not an athlete. That's just not how athletics work. Athletic, like bowling, not athletic. I'm sorry. Anybody can bowl from a chair. It's fun. It's a game, but it's not a sport. You know.
Well, I've made this distinction before when talking about baseball, because just like there's things that are games, and then there's things that are sports, and there is a difference.
Like the only thing running for baseball is the fact that there's bases that you have to move to. You know what I mean? But like even golf. There was a golfer who had like a disability, and after, a whole round of golf couldn't walk the whole course, but it was part of the rules that you couldn't use a cart because that's the athletic portion of golf. The only physical demanding part of golf is swinging over and over again and walking and carrying your clubs or whatever, right?
They should make them run. It's like what do you call it? It turns it into like a tactical thing. You got your like big pack and...
But it's sort of like a neat comparison, though, because when you start calling video games or passive engagement active engagement, it's confusing, I think, even to kids. So as they're building their maturity and their responsibility centers and, that higher order functioning of their brain, that higher order cognition, they're distorting it. Like it's being built wrong.
Right.
I think that sitting still is an activity.
Yeah, it's kind of like the that whole thing that's coming around Facebook, where they're arguing that like Facebook and social media are changing your brain, and we've been arguing that if you play games responsibly, video games will change your brain for the better. But if you play them irresponsibly, like it'll be poison. And just like Facebook changing your psychology, making you depressed, which it will, but and
it's just the excesses that are bad, essentially. And it's just like everything. Too much water kills you. Too much oxygen kills you. Too much carbon dioxide kills you. Not enough carbon dioxide kills you. Like
it's kind of like that thing where I keep bringing it up about evil, where all evil is just corrupted good.
Yeah, and all good is just fixed, ordered evil.
Yeah. So
one other thing I wanted to get to, if you don't mind, is like the therapeutic uses of games, because a lot of PTSD sufferers and people with bipolar and just like mental cognitive disabilities, or people with dementia even, I heard they're starting to help stimulate the brain or to get through traumatic experiences using virtual reality or games, essentially, because you use a game engine for the virtual reality.
Well, but I've heard now on a basic level, I've heard of this, because you get someone playing a video game and you get seniors playing a video game, and you're getting them to use their brain. Like they'd be sitting there watching TV and their brains, they're just kind of not engaged. But if you engage them, like one of the things they keep telling you about Alzheimer's is, well, the first thing you want to do is exercise your body, because the best thing you can do to be smarter and to get your brain working is to become fit, because your brain needs two things. Well, your brain needs one thing. It needs oxygen, and to get that oxygen, it needs blood, and it needs tons of blood. It needs more energy than anything else in your body. And if your body is a machine that pushes blood up there, you're going to be able to think better, period. And then drink water. But the second thing you can do is exercise the muscle of the brain on its own, and this
metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically, yeah. but not too metaphorically. And getting your brain working. If you stop using your brain, it's just like anything else in our bodies, it'll deteriorate. And so constantly, like every day, think about something. Every day, make your brain do something difficult, and your brain will stay beefy.
Give yourself many headaches and you won't go mental.
Yeah.
Well, you'll have less chance. It's always just a probabilities game with biology, but
well, the thing is, it's always going to happen to us. It's just it happens later, and it's probably happens not as bad. And
puzzles are great for that kind of thing, though.
Yeah, puzzles are great, but you can once you solve a puzzle, it's gone. So you get
when you get good at puzzles, then you need harder ones. Otherwise, it's useless.
Right, which is what's great about video games is that you can have a task, but a video game will allow a task to be very difficult by the nature of the medium. So you can have a task be like, solve a puzzle, but then it'll randomize another puzzle for you. Great. Well, what if there's people attacking you while you're doing a puzzle? What if there's puzzle pieces are changing shape constantly? This sounds difficult. It's like, actually, it's really fun or something. But the virtual reality stuff is a bit different because I don't know. Is it different? Because I keep hearing about this.
One of my favorites was for PTSD. They had like a VR thing, and you're going down the street in a Humvee or something, and there's actions going on around you, and the scene is basically put together by some developers after hearing the story of the person who went through that type of experience, who's having trouble getting past it. But they'll attach some really simple rudimentary sensors to their fingertips and stuff to test stress, and then they'll change the colors and schema in the game to show you and reflect what the inside of your body is doing. So as you calm down, the sun will go down, and as you get more hype, the sun, like for example. But it'll change, it'll give you visual feedback to what's happening subconsciously inside your body. And then you can use that to temper the progression of the game and ease yourself into the stressful situation, as opposed to being forced into it and then recoiling, and then being forced in it and recoiling, and then you're just sort of getting traumatized over and over again, right?
Yeah.
It sets the pace based on your body's reaction, and then it learns to slow the reaction, because what you're trying to do is control like the colors as opposed to the situation.
Right.
So you're still in the situation, but you can control everything through your breathing or rhythm or whatever like that. Well, so I find that stuff fascinating too.
I have heard too, that sounds absolutely fascinating. If any one of our viewers knows anyone working on that, that'd be a great connect us, please. We'll have them on. But we'll no, I've also heard this is probably hearsay though, like, veterans playing war games to like Call of Duty and stuff like that to come to terms with it. One of the things that I found was interesting was there was a game called like 5 Days in Fallujah, which was canceled because people were thinking, oh, the veterans will hate this. You can't mock our veterans by making a game about the Iraq War, blah, 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 blah. And it was about the worst battle of the Iraq War. The problem is that there were veterans from the battle involved in the making of the game, which seems to me like a really good way of coming to terms with the trauma you were in by going through it and making an experience for others to understand it, because the act of creativity in itself. And I think
and it'd be so much harder for them to describe it to their loved ones than to just show them a finished product. You know what I mean?
It's like this, and then you show them like that first scene in Saving Private Ryan showed a lot of people. They showed us that in grade 10. M for mature. Well, M for you need to see this because kids are the ones who go to war.
Medal of Honor 2 started like that too.
Yeah.
That was like the opening sequence was you on one of those transport boats and the thing opening and like, thousands of you all lining on the beach, and it was D-Day or whatever. But
yeah, well, they overdid it. They ended up doing that in like every Medal of Honor and Call of Duty game.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, it ended up getting a little redundant because they're like, well, what do we do? Let's just do a D-Day landing again. It's like, well, we did it in the first game. And like, honestly, in 2001, when Medal of Honor came out and you're like storming D-Day, it had that impact. Like nowadays, the graphics are terrible, so you don't really have that impact, but you hadn't seen those graphics before. So it did have that like, reaction.
Yeah. And I think it's almost better that it wasn't more realistic, because it's just a taste. It's not supposed to be a literal exact representation like a video. It should be enough to get our imagination going like, holy shit, like we should never go to war. This is
And
awful.
there are a few anti-war games. What's that one? Spec Ops: The Line, which was not supposed to be an anti-war game. It was supposed to be just a bland tactical shooter. And they're like, what if we made a story like this? And it's like, the name is stupid. It's Spec Ops, so Special Operations, The Line. But then the whole game is you crossing the line, and it makes you feel terrible about it. And there's a lot of games are doing that narratively these days, and I think that helps a lot of people. We're getting away from therapeutics, but I think that helps a lot. But I think one thing that I was going to bring up is that there's another side to games that we often forget, and I think it does help therapeutically, is that the creation of video games itself.
That's a good point.
Because you're like, we do art therapy here, we have music therapy here, we have all these things where you can create blah blah blah, and you paint it, and it's just like all hippy dippy and whatever. And it's like, all right, I've done when I was learning JavaScript, we made little games, and one of them was like a Mario game. But like, you go in there and it's just like, okay, this is going to be a 6-week course, we're going to be making Doom. So from scratch, you're going to make your own Doom game, and you're going to play it on something. It doesn't matter, because you can play Doom on anything. And
to me, that's the only way I learned geometry. Like, I just stumbled my way through it in high school, but it wasn't until I got like instant feedback from the code I wrote, showing like what do you call it? Like, when you're skewing from a perspective view, how things in the distance kind of get shrunken out and stretch in. That's all just like vector geometry and math and dot products, and you know what I mean? But like, none of that made sense or mattered to me in high school until I started playing with game engines. And then all of a sudden, a 3-point vector and a 4-point RGBA value for a color, it was like, oh, that's why you cross product matrices. Like, that's that's what the Pythagorean theorem and stuff is for. It's like to get camera perspective and depth perspective and all those types of little details. Like, it puts geometry into practice.
Yeah, and on an even more basic level, you're not paying attention to the more time you use productively and not paying attention to, my ex-wife left and she took the kids, some random trauma, and my life's terrible and I want to shoot myself. Instead of shooting yourself, you're now building a video game about shooting demons or something. And that sounds extremely healthy when I put it like that. And I don't know, maybe
Monster Hunter was great for that. That's all you do, is you just drop into a world and slay giant monsters.
Yeah, even coming back to like Just Cause 3, it's like, I need explosions. Like, when I was going through the worst part of my myocarditis, I couldn't focus on anything. Like, I wasn't able to play my like Hearts of Iron 4, World War II, like grand battle simulator, and like march the armies of some random country that I built up from nothing over, and while listening to a podcast. And I was physically unable to do that anymore. So what I was doing was, I was like, okay, I need something simpler. I need explosions, because that's all my brain understands right now. And for me, that was kind of the therapy. It kept my butt in the chair and stopping, because I have a tendency to go for a run. It's like, Jordan,
you get squirmy.
You've gotten pneumonia. It's like, oh, but I'm not doing my push-ups.
Recovering from surgery was exactly the same. Every time I was bedridden after surgeries and I couldn't even like get up or bathe standing up and things like that, being forced to sit still when you can't sit still is just a nightmare. I can't even describe it to people who don't understand, but like, it's like having insomnia on top of insomnia.
One of the things I noticed about myself a long time ago is that, because of the way my brain works, which just sounds kind of like a hippie way of putting it, but whatever, is that like, if I didn't have my audiobooks on me, it wasn't like I'm always reading. Oh, look at me, I'm always reading something, I'm so intellectual. No, if I didn't have my audiobooks, I would flip out. I would get
grind
anxious.
Your teeth down to nothing or whatever.
I'd be like, because I'd be like, I hate waiting. I'm sorry if I'm angry and you made me wait. It's not you, it's the waiting.
It's not you, it's me.
It's me, and it's directed at you. But it's that kind of thing. It forces you to sit, because you're in the immersion is the thing that's important. I kind of want to get back into this. because the thing that makes it work is the immersion. I could sit and read a book. The only reason I don't sit and read a book is because I have audiobooks, and it keeps my brain busy. But the thing about a video game is that the immersion of the task and the addition of a narrative or a storyline or even a basic thing and all of that other stuff that goes along with it makes it so that while you're doing it, you don't really think about it. And that's what we're trying to gamify. That's what we're trying to, leverage to teach people this stuff. But it's the thing that makes it work. That's the element that the medium relies on. And it's I don't even think we understand really how it works yet, because we've only had these things since the 80s is when they really started. We've had them since the 60s and 70s, like for Space War and all that. And if you really want to know more about that stuff, you can read a bit about it on my I talk a bit about it in my thesis, but it's
which is called,
it's in our
give it a proper plug, you dumbass.
It's in the first episode. Go find it. I don't need to plug my thesis. It's like 2 years old now, but
oh my god, the archives won't even have it.
Yeah, the third chapter is kind of redundant now. I think it's a bit out of date. The first chapter still holds up, but what I'm thinking is that we don't really understand games yet, but it is teaching us a lot about what it means to be human. And I think one of the most important things it's teaching us is that fun is important. And I think this is kind of one of the things that we need to realize, is that we're not just automaton drones. We deserve, and we work better when we have an hour or two every once in a while of fun on our own, separate from reality. And video games are a great way of doing that.
It's probably better than television. Like all the commercials and stuff, like every 5 minutes or every 3 seconds, the scene's changing. Like they're trying to drag you along because, nobody can like follow an actor go through a monologue anymore. Like it's almost unheard of to have a 2-minute uncut scene.
Yeah.
But I think games at least are a better utilization of your energy and time, like efficiency wise, than to sit there and have to sit through commercials for a sitcom that just makes you giggle at the same jokes over and over again.
Although me and Megan are still watching Legend of Galactic Heroes, which will have 10 minutes of conversation on like democracy and versus autocracy, and then you'll be like, yeah, Yang Wenli's awesome. It's just like, whoa, I guess that's a quality issue. But on average, you're right. It's television is insulting in its oversimplicity, and you should be insulted by television. And
I can't stand it. It's so obtuse. Buy this. I'm like, who the are you? Like, don't tell me what to do and what to think and what to feel and what to want. Like,
yeah, and like they assume stuff about you that's insulting, so that you want to buy something that you wouldn't ever actually want.
The way they present it too is like, look at this truck driving through mud. I'm like,
yeah,
who wants a truck so that they can drive through mud after they just washed it?
So maybe video games are just more honest.
Yeah,
like. Because like I'm looking at Doom right now, and I look at here and it says, play Doom, be a badass. It's like, yep, that's why I'd play that game. Here's some DLC. You don't need it, but here it is. It's like, thanks.
Resident Evil, there's creepy zombies everywhere. Perfect.
Yeah. The president's daughter is in danger. And it's a lot more honest in some respects, because you're getting that, and to have and some games have tried putting advertisements in. You'll get like product placement.
There's a bunch of it now. Like product placement's terrible in sports games, all those banners, and they put Verizon commercials between periods on a game that has no loading. That's just intrusive, if you ask me. Like, if you pay for a game to get advertising that stops you from playing, that you have to watch, that to me is just offensive. Like, I don't know how you feel about that.
I don't like advertising. I know I'm like Captain Capitalism over here, but advertising can go fuck itself.
Yeah, it went way overboard. If I'm looking for something, I want to be able to find it and know that you offer this product or service. But if you're getting in the way of my free time when I paid you for it, like, really, go take a long walk on a short pier. That's my feelings.
And Well, it's part of me is like a good product will stand on its own, but another part of me says, and it's kind of, I keep bringing this back, is that there's a tiers of quality when it comes to every form of media, and advertising is no different. But most of advertising, because of the nature of it, will fall down here, and so you'll get like YouTube ads and primetime soap opera ads and stuff like that down there. But and then only the really good ones, which will actually engage you and get you to be like, oh, I almost watched this intentionally. But
Yeah, YouTube's been pissing me off lately because I watch so many lectures and audiobooks and stuff like that and podcasts. It's now dropping commercials that look and sound like a podcast or somebody broadcasting live, and it's like a 5-10 minute. Some of them are half an hour long.
Well,
so
I kind of understand.
It'll sit through the whole half hour.
Well, and that's why I didn't admonish Justin for getting YouTube Premium. Like when he brought it up, he's just like, and he felt guilty about it. And which is kind of like, oh, I bought YouTube Premium. It's like, dude, I get it.
Yeah.
Like I listen to podcasts on my phone all the time, and I don't have an ad blocker on there. And so, yeah.
I don't know. I kind of feel like games are something that's in my private space in my home. I really, really don't think the place for an advertisement is my free time. I think an advertisement's there if I'm like voluntarily going to like a pub or a bar or out in public or a park or whatever. Do all that stuff in public, but in my home, I should be able to turn off ads. That should just be a thing, and I think we should regulate that too. Because you can go into the settings and shut the ads off. That would make sense to me.
Well, okay, so this is an EULA issue. Because because generally
I should be able to hack my games and get the ads out of it. Is that what you're saying?
Some people do. Like you get hackers go in and be like, oh, remove this, or you get modders. There's a lot of games have mods, so you can like turn off certain things, and there's a lot of
GTA 5 is a good example for that.
Yeah. And like we should have I think we should, if we're going to legislate anything, it should be legislate the freedom to do with our property with what we wish, which includes, you have a game, you have code on your computer, your code doesn't belong to it. This is go back to our EULA episode. I should have the right to mod a game that I'm playing in my own house. Well, no, you can't. Well, who does it hurt? It doesn't hurt anybody. This is my meditation time where I'm, sitting there playing Bannerlord, hacking up, and playing a battle of like 50 guys, and all of a sudden Pepsi. It's like, no, that won't happen because they're this.
Oh, it'll get there. Trust me. Eventually, you'll start having Star Wars ads, like advertising Disney characters and shit, like in the background.
Well, and I think people aren't putting up with this in the gaming world, because a lot of times what we get, and this is the culture around video game creators, is that, and especially like mid-level to like indie creators, is that they don't want that. They have an idea.
They want the money from it, though.
Well, they want the money from it, but you get someone like like my wife's been playing Stardew Valley, and go play it, people. It's so cute, and it's made by one guy, and it's a great game, and it's so much content in the game, but you don't get the sense that these people are making this game with like, how can I sell out and put advertisements in this game? You get a lot of games that the thing that they're interested in is the game itself, and a lot of the models even in the AAA market go along with this. Like you see Paradox, and they'll put all the content behind a paywall, but they're doing that so that they don't have to put advertisements, third-party advertisements in the game, because they know that would wreck their product. And because
does it, even though they don't have to.
Right.
That's what bugs me.
Well, and that's corruption.
The gratuitousness of it.
That's
just like, you should tip us. Here's 30% added to your bill.
Yeah. And to me, that's corruption, because what's happening and what is, you get these teams working, and a good team will understand that what they're doing is art, and the content is necessary for the art. It's like, well, no, the art's in the code. Well, no one's going to look at your code. It's what the code does that's important. So a lot of time, and I think this is all conjecture on my part, but we are getting some new forms of monetization with the gaming industry that are letting people, like, that are leveraging the technologies that they're based on. So computing, cloud computing, all that stuff, these buzzwords that don't actually mean anything. So online.
Oh, it totally does.
Yeah, I know, but like if I say Web 2.0, does it mean something? Kind of, but not really. And so we're leveraging all these new technologies that we have to try new ways of monetizing stuff. And before, all we had was TV, and it's you're not interacting with it, so they have to force the message into you. And so what you get was, just these commercials that took up like 20 to 30% of your time. That's time you've wasted, that you've given away, that they've taken from you. Now in a game, in a mobile game, they don't give a hoot, because they'll
free to
just
play. You expect it though.
Yeah, well, it's free to play. Yeah, because you're playing. Yeah, I'm with you on that. But if you're paying for it, most of the time you're gonna get just the piece of art, the game, that you are paying for. Now,
but it's one thing for Nintendo to put like a Nintendo logo in like a Mario Kart racing game, and it's just in the mountain. Like, it doesn't get in your way or stop you from playing.
Yeah.
It's when they put up the barrier on like an NHL game and stop you from playing so that you can stare at a commercial for 30 seconds and watch it count down. Like, that to me is just, it's downright intrusive.
Now, to me, that's just caveat emptor, like buyer beware. You should know.
They don't tell you that on the box.
Well, no, but you should know. But what it does tell you on the box is that it's a game made by EA, and so that should be the first. That should be the first clue that you might be getting stuff that you didn't pay for. It's like all of a sudden it's trying to download McAfee onto your computer. It's like, maybe don't buy that game, games from that company. Or like Activision, who used to make really great games, is now doing the same thing. They're like, how can we do this? And you see this with games that are made by companies that, I guess have committees, because it's, again, this is art. Like any TV that was made by someone who's like, okay, I want to do a thing, let me do it, I just need a bit of investment. And then those were the best shows. You get like Twin Peaks, or like my favorite Babylon 5, who just like, we're going to do something, it's going to be its own thing. But then the rest of TV was like, committees being like, we need a funny family show for people to watch during this time slot. Well, that's not going to have any artistic merit. It's not going to have any interactive value.
It's like building a boy band where they just find individuals and they piece them together like a manufactured marketing campaign.
Right. But if you get people who actually want to, like, and this happens in movies too, where the people who actually have a vision will make it. And it's the same with video games, because it's a different medium, but it's tapping the same source of human creativity. And so you have to approach it from a same creative place. And that means you have to kind of let people make their games. And when you get a committee to make a game, it ends up just being like any other media made by a committee, because you have to have that vision of what's going to happen. And I say vision, but we all kind of know what you mean. This is what I want to try. This is what I want to do. Let's see if we can do it. And then a team gets to work on it, and then something weird comes out, or something different, or even something like that's happened before, but better, but they just do it better. And this is how art works. This is how creativity works, which is why we're pushing creativity. But the thing about video games that I think, just to wrap it up, that's good, is that the reason that this works better than any other medium is because it involves the player. You are taking part, and this is what a lot of our technology now is doing. You are, even the audience is now taking part in the art itself. And video games, I think, are some of the most creative and interesting aspects of the new technology that we're getting.
I'm actually tempted to suggest that even this YouTube channel and like the whole being able to comment and interact with YouTube creators is a huge part of the engagement of the YouTube community and the Twitch community and the Snapchat community. Like, I think that's what people really love. I think you hit on that like squarely, where we're deviating away from cable TV because there's no interactivity to it. And we can speak directly to the producers and writers of our favorite content rather than that cabal of, shareholders and market agents and advertisers in the background who are.
There was a there's a song put out by a guy I listened to recently, and I said, I really like this one. Thank you for putting this on. And he put that little like heart thing on it. He read my comment. I interacted with them. There was interaction, and there, like, I do talk about this in a bit. And this was definitely my advisor's big thing, was the YouTube is an interactive medium, and I took it and defined it in my first chapter, what interactivity is. And this is definitely that, because people respond when they're part of the conversation. They want to take part in the conversation. They don't just want to be watching The Simpsons. They want to be there having the adventure with The Simpsons, which is why The Simpsons like games, even though they were so dumb and bland, they sold like nonsense because people wanted to, a good. This is one. I think Justin Droot. He's a Lord of the Rings scholar, and I actually want to talk to him on this channel. But he mentioned, one of his points is that one of the reasons that we like Lord of the Rings so much, in its book form, and it's one of the reasons it captivates you, is because even though it's tragic and nostalgic in its nature, you want to be there. You want to stand there and be like, yo, I got this. You want to grab a sword and a shield and be like, let's go fight some evil. You want to be taking part in those things that are happening. And that is what draws people into that, because you can imagine yourself being, a town folk in the Shire, or maybe even on your darkest moments, being an orc or something. And that's part of the magic of Lord of the Rings, but that magic is leveraged to another level with even some of the most simple video games. That's why people like Mass Effect, because you are there and you're taking part in all those big changing events. And the more we make these video games, the better they're getting. They are getting better. This golden age of video games. It's like, no, they're getting better. It takes a while to make them. So, you have to wait for your next experience. Patience.
So always remember to game responsibly.
Yes.
Playing 4 hours a day and you're only hanging out with friends for like 1 hour a week, probably something skewed there. You might want to just reevaluate your priorities a smidgen.
Yeah.
But we're not against games. Just be responsible, be an adult. And if you're young and you're watching this and you're wondering how much you can play to your heart's content. Just keep it in mind. Don't let it get away from you. But you're young and have fun. That's part of growing up, is having fun. So do it a lot.
Yeah.
I'm all in favor of kids playing tons of games, as long as it's paired with running outside and climbing trees.
Well, one
the
final
game could
thought.
Inspire you to jump off a bridge.
One final thought that I haven't brought up and we haven't talked about. Is that like one of the things that I've been doing is I've been playing video games with my father when I can. I'm sorry, but and that's one thing that we underestimate, is that it does bring people together, and it can. And I can't go and we've been playing Borderlands, so it's this great co-op game, and we just we go off and we shoot monsters in far-flung reaches of imaginary space, and it's.
My dad would play golf with me when I was really young on Nintendo.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
like a bonding thing. Just a golf simulator where you tap the thing and the bar goes up and down.
And it's great for that. But yeah, so I think we've said our piece.
Yeah.
Fun is important.
Anybody
but
who's like completely against games before listening to this got some insight or perspective as to why people might benefit from the activity, even if it may not seem as productive as they'd like people to be.
That, and it's fun to talk about things that we find fun.
Yeah, totally. And we need more frivolous, less gravitas sometimes.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of gravitas lately.
It was a good change up. I'm glad we did this.
All right. We'll see you guys next week. Do the RSS feed and the YouTube stuff and I don't know what Kris does.
Yeah, the yada yada below. You know the drill. If you're watching 51 episodes by now, then we probably don't even need to say it.
But if comment, tell us what games you're playing. All right.
Yeah,
see
let's
you guys.
Fight about it.
Yeah, fight. That game sucks. All
Catch
right,
you
see you
later.
guys.